All right, folks. Welcome, everybody, once again to Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. I'm your host, Mike Frank, here with Jamie Uyeyama. We have Greg Flamong also producing the show, and he'll drop in now and again for some comments and thoughts as the show goes along. Before we get going, I wanted to mention once again, it's a great time to sign up for Irish Sports Daily. You can go to the front page of Irish Sports Daily, click on the premium section, and sign up today. There's certainly going to be a lot going on with Notre Dame football, Notre Dame recruiting. Notre Dame just had a big junior day. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll probably talk more about that next week. See if I can bring on Christian or Jamie, or not Jamie, Christian or Matt to talk a little bit about that. I think it's important to get a little bit of distance between now and the junior day before you kind of really get a good indication of how things went. So we'll talk more about that. Also, I wanted to mention, folks, if you listen on the show, through podcasts and stuff, you can find our show live and you can watch the show live, participate and chat. We usually do it at 10 a.m. on Mondays on YouTube Live. So you can search for Irish Sports Daily and you can find live. Jamie and I will be on there talking. Of course, Greg will pop on now and again as well. Also, make sure you sign up for for our channel. Make sure you sign up and click the like button. That certainly helps us. I know Jamie and Greg will be doing lots of breakdowns from the game as far as good stuff that happened in the championship game. Jamie released some stuff on Irish Sports Daily today, but I'm sure some of that will also go on Hit and Hustle as well. So make sure you check out what we do online there on YouTube Live and also our YouTube channel. Just search for Irish Sports Daily, subscribe to the channel, and also like the videos. It certainly helps us. And we'll go from there. Also wanted to mention before we get going, our sponsor, which is ESQ Clothing. ESQ has been making the best handmade custom suits, sport coats, tuxedos, and shirts for the last decade. Has been featured on GQ, ESPN, USA Today. You've seen them dressing your favorite players and coaches. ESQ only gets the best fabric from Italy and England's top mills. With over 40,000 fabrics to choose from, you're guaranteed to look your best. Go visit esqclothing.com and book your appointment. Mention ISD and get 10% off your entire purchase. Once again, that's esqclothing.com. Well, Yama, I mean, first of all, man, there's a lot that's gone on here in the last week. It's just been a news-packed situation, but I do want to get to the game, and I think we start with the game. The end result was not what we hoped for, but first of all, and I got to say this before we even start, I sure hope NBC gets Skycast. I mean, there is no better way to watch a game than Skycast. I mean, you get to see the whole field. You get to see end zone picture. You get to see exactly what's going on in the game, and it certainly helps us to do our job better when we can see that angle and we can see exactly, who's doing a good job at the offensive line and who's getting to the second level and are the tight ends blocking as well as they look to be or not look to be. And, was there anybody actually open on this route? It's hard to see from the TV copy, but when you get that Skycast view that we saw on ESPN, it's just a godsend. And to be honest with you, you can turn off announcers that you don't want to listen to, i.e. Kirk Herbstreit and Fowler, and just watch the game. And I'm telling you that's worth it for price alone. But I love Skycast. I think it's awesome. Jamie, your thoughts?
Yeah, I remember NBC kind of like messed around with it before, but then people complain because there's just people don't like change, right? No one likes change. So it's like there's just the regular, they're like, why are they showing this angle? And I was like, well, it's actually
I love this
better.
I love
And
this
it was yeah. So they were doing more of it. I remember they did it. I can't remember when it was maybe like 4 years ago or something like that. And then it maybe just was because kind of complaints that they got like, less maybe the feedback
it was like the New Mexico game in 2019.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it was because I remember that was Kyle Hamilton's he had the pick six, and so that I remember it was on Skycam. So
yeah, well, and also too from that game, I believe that was also the same game where they ran that kind of like that jet sweep kind of like fake reverse thing where it was like I think Fink scored on one. and Avery Davis also scored, and it was like you could see from the Skycast view, like they showed like an all 22 version, and it just looks so much better. Like it was a drastic
You
difference.
can
So
really
and
see who's doing well.
yeah, and
you
then
can see
obviously
who's
too.
well in the play.
Yeah, and then after the fact too, we get the all 22 and we get the end zone copy and stuff, and it changes how you view and how you can see certain things within the game, especially for me, like someone who's like line play.
Yeah,
the end
that's
zone
why I love
copy
it.
is just
Absolutely.
so much different, right? So yeah, I mean, I would love if they had that, and I think when you kind of like look back on it, kind of like transitioning to the game, I think that's something that really stood out to me is like watching it back and just seeing like Notre Dame's offensive line, I thought played really, really well in
That's what
this
I
game.
want to talk about. Dude,
Yeah.
I mean, you rewatch that game and you have to be excited about what you saw in Notre Dame's offensive line. I mean, you just have to be. Jugasaw just played. He had a couple mistakes. That's going to happen. You haven't played tackle all year. Had a couple mistakes, but dude more than held his own against JT, and they did a great job of combo blocks in this game, Jamie. I thought, they were getting to the second level. I thought the tight ends blocked well, for the most part. And when I rewatch the game, I encourage everybody, especially if you get the Skycast view on YouTube channel, or what is it, YouTube TV that I've been watching. You'll see what Jamie and I are talking about. And Emil Wagner played very, very good. Rocco played very, very good. Coogan did well. Schroff did well, not as probably his best game, but he played pretty well. And look, they're going against the very best team in the country. And people forget, man, this team had 5 starts or 6 starts amongst all 5 of them going into it. A lot of those guys weren't even playing in this game. So it's amazing to see what they did at offensive line. And when you see how well they communicated, I thought that was one of the things that really stood out to me was, when Ohio State sent a lot of stuff, they did a really good job of communication and picking up things. I thought Ohio State did as well. Unfortunately, I thought their offensive line played really well in this game as well, unfortunately. But, I was impressed. And there's not going to be a team that enters the season next year with more experience and talent than Notre Dame has at offensive line. When you talk about you're going to have all 5 starters returning, if based on Craig and Knapp and all those guys, if you want them, and then you have some other guys that you can plug in there that could be real elite guys like Jugasaw and who knows what happens with Gerby Lambert. But man, the sky is the limit for this offensive line. And I really think you'll see Notre Dame's offense take a big jump, especially if, Malachi is who we think he's going to be. And some of these receivers develop and become the players we think they can be. Look out for Notre Dame's offense next year. Provided you got to have a good quarterback play, but I think that the pass protection will be a lot better next year. And I'm excited about it. But anyway, go ahead, Jamie, with your thoughts here.
Yeah, well, I think they were going against what I think pretty much was consensus the best defensive line in college football, and I think they more than held their own. Like I thought actually, if you look at like comparatively how they performed compared to even Notre Dame's offensive line last year, which obviously featured Joe Alt and Blake Fisher, they were better than they were in that game. Like, I think it would have been really interesting to see if Notre Dame, if the game didn't get away from them, scoreboard wise, what they could have done running the ball, because especially on that first drive, like I thought they did a heck of a job. Like you mentioned, the combo blocks and stuff. Emil Wagner played really, really well in the run game stuff. He was, he had some just like dominant reps. I think him and Jugasaw, like for his second ever start as a left tackle, insane how well he did in that game. Like after
going
playing
against
right
JT?
guard the previous game, like really, really, you can tell, obviously, he's not like all like completely polished to where he's going to be, but it's just, he is
Natural
going to be
ability.
so friggin' good. And
First round pick.
Wagner, I thought too, I think one of probably the most valuable things that, if you look at where Notre Dame is and who they played in the college football playoff, is, man, they played a ton of great edge rushers in the college football playoff. And Wagner, certainly, he was tested, and no one's going to say he had a great game against Abdul Carter, but he's on the long list of people who got schooled by Abdul Carter, who's could be the number one pick in the draft. And the one thing is, he battled in that against Abdul Carter in that game and got better as the game went along. Also, if you look at, like, if he hadn't had that experience with Carter and going against like Jalen Walker and some of these other guys that Georgia had the week before, he doesn't do as well against Jack Sawyer in the championship game. And Jack Sawyer had dominated the CFP. He was one of the guys who was like an absolute game wrecker. He was not a game wrecker in that game. Wagner really held his own against them, probably won the battle, honestly, in my opinion.
I agree. Yes, he did. Yes.
Yeah. And so I think if you're looking at like kind of like the building blocks for what Notre Dame will be next year, is like, I think people should, obviously you got the backfield, Love and Price and Aeneas Williams. Obviously, Price didn't go into the portal like some people thought he might go into the portal. That's big for Notre Dame. And there's an Eli Raridon too, I should also mention, because I think Eli Raridon, the way he blocked in the second half of the season and in the CFP, is some of the best blocking I've seen from a tight end at Notre Dame.
Amen.
I would say probably since Tommy Tremble. I would say a different type of blocker, obviously, but like the stuff that he did there, he has just night and day improved to where he was. And Mike, you and I know what kind of athlete he is and what kind of talent he has like there. I think he is going to explode next year and just be a monster. Like if you told me that he's going to be a finalist for the Mackey Award next year because he's going to get all of a sudden all these touches and all that, like I can totally see it. I can totally see it. And I think there's a lot to be in this game. Things weren't going well. And you look at like, they had those two brutal drives in the second quarter that really kind of self-inflicted wounds, but they really only had 7 real drives in the game. It wasn't a game where they had, because they had the one at the end of the half and the one at the end of the game, which is nothing. They had 7 real drives in the game. 4 of them went 70 plus yards against what was the best defense in college football this year. I mean, they played pretty well. I mean, obviously, and Leonard played well and all of these kind of things. He had, some things early on that weren't great, but like at Great House too, there was a lot to build off this game, like to be excited about for next year.
I think Denbrock did a really good job in this game, considering you only had 7 drives. Really the things that wrecked the game were the drive 2 and drive 3, and drive 2. Some people say, well, you ran the ball there, but you can't run the ball all the time against a defense like this. You got to throw the ball. Throws the ball to Bo Collins, who was wide open on a crosser, and Leonard just missed it. Now, people would say, well, why are you throwing with Leonard? But they forgot Leonard made a lot of big throws on that first drive. He made some very important key throws. So if I'm Denbrock, I'm like, okay, I got a quarterback who's on and is throwing pretty well here. Let's make sure we keep him off balance. So then, of course, you have second down and you have a false start right after that on Bo Collins. So now you're in 2nd and 15. And then you have a holding penalty, and now you're in 3rd and forever. And that's what happened. Then the next drive, you look at the thing, they run for first down. Here's the thing. The second down call, I could see people questioning. All right, 2nd and 5. You just ran Riley Leonard. Why not throw there? Why not run there again? That one I could understand people would make a question about why you didn't run there. But again, I think you're trying to keep the team off balance. But next thing you know, there's not a good situation that happens on second down. Jagusa kind of gives up a pressure to JT, and Leonard's throw is rushed, and so now you're in 3rd and 5, and then that's when Mitch Evans knocks the ball up, the snap away, and they almost fumble the football. So those 3 drives killed him. Next thing you know, you're down 21-7, and it's a difficult thing to overcome. So I just saw so much that I was encouraged about when you looked at the offense and rewatching the game that got me excited, especially knowing all the players that are going to return and some of the young guys that we think are about ready to break out. Guys like Logan Soldate. A lot of people have talked very positively about him. Micah Gilbert, Cam Williams, KK Smith was starting to come on before he got injured. So, Great House is emerging. Hopefully Jordan Faison gets even better than he is and stays healthy. And so there's a lot to like about offensively. When I looked at the defensive part of the game, Jamie, it was just, they were just overwhelmed. There was just nothing that they could do. I don't think that there was much that Al Golden could do or call differently than what they did in the game. It just was, they just couldn't hold up. And they didn't do a very good job in tackling. I think that hurt them. But at the end of the day, they were just getting pushed around. And there's no cure for that. There just really is no cure for that. We can get down to that last call. I didn't like the last call, as far as allowing the single coverage of Jeremiah Smith there. I didn't like that call. I understand why people think it's an okay call. I think the situation at the end of the day is you have to make a play either way. Whether it's on 3rd and 11 and you're playing zone, or 3rd and 11 you're playing man coverage, you still have to make a play. And if they got the first down, it's over. So you still have to make a play. But at the end of the day, I think what we saw here, Jamie, in this game is what we've been saying as a staff for a long time, and that is Notre Dame has a lot of great players on the roster, and they have a lot of talent, and they have a great culture. But at the end of the day, you still need some elite talent. And I think Notre Dame was just lacking a little bit there, especially on D-line, especially depth, and then probably, at wide receiver. I think that those were kind of the most alarming things. I don't think the linebackers played very great in this game. I wasn't overly impressed with any of them in this game. But again, I think when somebody's 5 yards downfield before getting touched, it's hard to be a great linebacker in that situation as well. So your thoughts here overall defensively?
Yeah, I think this was the game, and we've talked about it forever about how at some point it was going to be the breaking point of missing Botello, Traore, Mills. They needed those guys. They needed those guys in this type of game against this type of opponent. They absolutely needed that. Ben Morrison, obviously that's, he's a game changer, right? If you look at, take Ben Morrison away from the game in 2023 and see how you do against Marvin Harrison and stuff, it changes everything, right? So I think that was ultimately, and injuries happen, but let's be honest, Notre Dame had more major injuries than any of the teams that were towards the end of the season.
Any in the playoff for sure.
Any of the playoff teams were close.
Yeah.
And I thought too, I think especially with the tackling, and you do give credit to the athletes that they have on Ohio State, but I thought that Notre Dame's defense had worn down. And because of, I think they put so much in that game to out physical Georgia in the Sugar Bowl and were fantastic. That to me, if we're looking at the best defensive performances of the season, that game against Georgia and what they did all across the board, man, just stellar all around. But I think that was such a physical game against that type of opponent. And no one else, if you look at it, no one else had to play at Georgia leading up to it. Like, I think that benefited Penn State when they had to, like, Penn State was playing not cupcakes, obviously not. They're good teams, but just not at the level of physicality and talent that you would play against a Georgia.
Yeah.
And then to follow that up, like, that had an impact. And then
especially when you don't have the dudes to rotate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially when you don't have the dudes to rotate. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Greg, you wanted to add?
I wanted to ask, just kind of build on this point, because it's something that I've been thinking about like the last couple of days, and something, again, that I didn't really consider going into it is, like, I mean, you look at Ohio State's defensive guys and all the guys that they got to come back, like, that's experience, and that's 4 or 5 years in a college football strength program, where you look at, like, so many of Notre Dame's defensive players are young, right? Like Drake Bowen, young, Jaden Osbury, young, Bryce Young, young, like Leonard Moore, freshman, even Christian Gray, sophomore, Adon Schuler, sophomore. Like, they have so many key players on defense who just don't have that grown man strength yet. Yeah. And I think that mattered in this game. Like, when you watch them, it's just like, man, they're moving completely differently. And look, that's why it's important for Ohio. Like, that's part of the reason why Ohio State's favored, right? Like, that's part of the reason why they're as good as they are, because not only did they get those guys to come back, but, like, they're older, right? And that's why losing someone like Riley Mills is so important, because he has that, like, no one has that body. No one does, or like even having Howard Cross, like, he can't barely walk. He can't even walk. Like, he has one leg. Like, so even that gets mitigated for that. Like, that's why, like, the defense, and, like, you just didn't have as many problems like that on offense. I think for the reason that it is, like, when you lost that many guys on defense, yes, but you lost that experience, and I think that ended up really hurting them. It's just like the youth, not the fact that they were inexperienced players, but the fact that, like, they just need more time. Like, for me, this is a huge off season for the team, not from a, like, schematic improvement standpoint, but just from a physical standpoint. Like, those guys, they just got to get bigger. It's got to get bigger.
I guarantee you, if you look at the reps that Howard Cross and Donnie Heinisch had to play compared to anybody else in the playoff, it would be astronomical. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Those guys just, and they're undersized guys to begin with, so just the physical wear and tear and beat down that your body would take, and look, I realize it's only 10 reps here and 10 reps there, or 20 reps here and 20 reps there, but when you're going against 340-pound guys and you're just constantly beating on, it's just huge. It's tough. And the Uyeyama knows. I mean, none of them really, had any impact on you, but all your teammates, having to deal with that. Yeah. I mean, you could handle it, but.
Sure. 90 plays a game, put me in there.
Yeah.
I really think too, it's a great point. It's a great point by Greg. And I think that, one of the things that stood out, and to me really says a lot about kind of where Notre Dame's going to be in the next couple years, is the draft eligible talent and how the team was built. The team wasn't really built to be a national championship level team in year 3 of Freeman right now, like, in terms of where they had in draft eligible. Not that they didn't have talent, not that they didn't have top talent, all that, but Ohio State, 16 projected guys who were draft eligible that could be drafted. Notre Dame, 6 is what where I saw. I mean, they could have 8 or something, but also consider that, like, out of the 6, Mills and Morrison are included in that 6. So you take those 2 guys away, and then all of a sudden it's 4, right? So there's all of that there that really, when you think about it, like, Adon Schuler is going to, he was very good in the playoff overall, right? But, like, he is going to be a different player next year and 2 years from now. Like, that's all of that kind of stuff. Leonard Moore, Leonard Moore, what a freshman season. but like
Wow.
he is going to be a different player a year from now and all that. Like, so all of these where Notre Dame is built and primarily the defense, 18 guys play 20 plus plays a game for them on defense in the playoff. A dozen of the guys are guys who are back next year. And really, most of those guys have 2 years left or 3 years left if they want it, right? Like, that's how the kind of defense was built and how it kind of ended up being, because you're losing the guys that are hurt too. So, because that 12 doesn't even include Traore, right? And so, or Botello, right? So, but Traore's obviously got multiple years left and stuff too. So that is, I think, something, when I kind of like take away from the year is that like the defense, and I don't know if we want to transition to the defensive coordinator talk now, or you want to leave it for later, but like whoever's going to be the defensive coordinator, you're set up well. You're set up well for going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the next thing to talk about here is the defensive coordinator position. I mean, I think losing Al Golden, it's a blow, and I don't care what anybody says. It's a huge blow. I think I've never seen a coordinator as good as Al Golden, at Notre Dame. I think there's been some guys who are close, but the thing that I think people don't understand is there are a lot of good X's and O's guys who can put it up on the board, show it, and they have the ability to kind of look at things and know, okay, well, this should work, that should work. It's something completely different during the game, in the game, to recognize it, be able to communicate it to your team, and actually go and address it. And, that a lot of times was happening drive 2 under Al Golden. We would have the feel out drive, the first drive where a team gets going and marches down the field and usually kicks a field goal. And Al Golden looks and says, okay, this is what they're doing. Here's how we're going to react. And then it's just like a vice, just keeps closing and closing and closing. And then they have nothing. And that is what Al Golden was so great at. And I've never seen a coach be able to do that as well as he has. And Jamie, as consistently as he has. I mean, there are guys who've had good games, but there haven't been guys who had 2 amazing seasons like Al Golden has had in these last couple of years. And it's a huge loss. And there are, like I said, there's a lot of guys that can come in and probably do a pretty good job. But I think if there's one thing that Al Golden was great at, that's what he was great at. And that's going to be missed. It just is. I think you could get a guy who could do pretty well, but that's just a very difficult thing. And the only way to really overcome that is you better have a better offense. And the good news, I think they will. So thoughts here real quick with Al Golden.
Yeah, he was fantastic. Anyone could say what they want about the last game and how it went, but when we're talking about like over the course of the last 2 years, like you said, it had been since Caleb Williams in 2022 since a guy had a game like that against their defense. I think that Will Howard was amazing in this game, by the way, too. He was great in the game.
He really played outstanding. Yes,
he was unbelievable. He was actually better than Williams was in 2022, just within what they were doing and asking him to do.
He made some money that day. He
absolutely did. Yeah, absolutely did. Just a clutch performance. Golden just did such a great job of like really. First of all, the fact that he adjusted so much from year 1 to year 2, that he could always just say, hey, this is what our strengths are, and lean into it, but then also flip it in a game and really just change things within it and just do different things all the time where they were a heavy man team, but they mixed in a lot of things. They didn't just play cover. It wasn't Purdue playing cover 1 the same way over and over again and then just getting roasted, right? Because anyone, even if you have studs, if you do that all game, you're gonna get beat, right? And that's not what they did, right? That's not what they did. So I think that they did such a good job of just opponent preparation, just within the game, making adjustments, really getting the guys to play fast and, rewarding smart players and getting those guys to kind of play fast. And it was just taking advantage of the strengths of the football intelligence of the players and really just like maximizing it. I don't think they've named they named the finals for the Bros Award. I think they named the actual winner of it later on. They used to do it earlier, but I think they do it later now. He was the best defensive coordinator in college football this year, I think, by far. I don't even think Jim Knowles, obviously fantastic. He's going to Penn State, well deserved for that, the money he's going to make. But he also had all these guys they paid for JT to come back and Sawyer to come back and all these guys to come back, right? They were set up in a way that was just at a different level than anyone else to succeed. And what Golden was able to do while losing all those guys and having to adjust and doing that. I mean, it's a staff effort. Obviously, everybody else did it as well with the position coaches. I think he did a great job this year. But
no doubt,
man, he was fantastic. And I mean, you could say these 2 years, like you said, Mike, as good as a job as a DC has done at Notre Dame in the modern era.
I can't remember anybody doing a better job. So we're moving on to the position. Obviously, the latest news is Chris Ash. It could potentially be the target. There's been a lot of discussion on the board about it today, the pros and cons. Can you keep Mike Mickens? There's been rumors of a co-defensive coordinator situation. And it was interesting because, the one thing that I saw, there was an interesting quote that Urban Meyer made. And they asked him about Ash. Well, actually, they just were asking him about, Chris Ash when he was hired as the defensive coordinator for Texas. And his comment was, top coordinator hired to me in all of college football was Chris Ash, one of the best coaches I've ever been around. What he'll give to the Texas staff, he's been a head coach. He was much more than a defensive coordinator. He was our defensive coordinator for the year we won the national championship. I hired him. He came in and changed a lot of things on defense, brought in rugby tackling. But beyond that, every player issue with things, I would always lean on him. He was that good of a coach. He's by far the best coordinator hire of the year. They've recruited well. Anyway, he's talking about it. And I think the stats showed that he did pretty well when he was there at Texas for the 1 year before Urban Meyer then took him to Jacksonville. So as I was mentioning to Greg, it's one thing for Urban Meyer to come out. I mean, what is he going to say when he's asked about it, right? He's going to say nice things about a former coach. That's just what happens. But the fact that he took him with him to Jacksonville the very next year, I think says what he thinks about him as a defensive coordinator. The other thing that I think people don't understand is co-defensive coordinator with Luke Fickell. Well, people don't remember Fickell was the defensive coordinator. They brought Ash in. They wouldn't have made Ash co-defensive coordinator unless they felt they needed some help at defensive coordinator. You just don't throw somebody in there for the heck of it. It can really disrupt things, as we saw, with Mike Denbrock, who was the quarterback's coach? That was here, Jimmy Sanford. Yeah. Mike Sanford situation that can really disrupt things by doing that. So there is a risk if you do go with a co-DC type of situation, as we've seen. But it has worked out a number of times. You look at the situation at LSU when they won a national championship. At offensive coordinator there was a co-situation. Obviously, the Fickell-Ash situation worked out for Ohio State. So there's a lot of things. There's a lot of examples of this. But I do think it's something, Jamie, that Urban Meyer brought him in, and he wouldn't have brought him in unless he felt like they needed something there at defense that they were not getting. It just wouldn't have made any sense to do that. So your thoughts here on that?
I mean, you could say a lot of things about Urban Meyer. Certainly some not very good. Certainly is maybe not the greatest judge of character when it comes to a lot of people. You can't say that the guy doesn't care. The thing that he cares most about is winning.
Yeah.
He's not going to bring in anyone that he doesn't think is a great coach. And I mean, Ash ran the defense, like he called the defense. He wouldn't have brought him in if that was the case. So I obviously when this was something that we had talked about before, off the air, Mike, when you were kind of letting me know that Ash was a potential candidate, and we'll see where it goes, right? We'll see where it goes. But obviously, when you hear that Chris Ash, I mean, the first thing you think about is, well, okay, he hasn't been a defensive coordinator in college football since 2020. He, he's been in the NFL. Well, this happened or that. Why hasn't he been on a name on the board of any of these like searches or whatever? Which, to be honest, like I know that when Notre Dame was like last looking at, I think he was a name that we had heard at the time. So this is someone that had talked before. So we don't know that he wasn't talked to or a candidate at some of these other places, because let's be honest, people put out stuff, and I will put out a list too, and where all of a sudden you put out a list of these guys, and mostly it's guys who have done well very recently in college football. Mm-hmm. And then names will come up and you'll be like, that wasn't a name I was thinking of. And it'll be someone who isn't kind of related to any of these things or related to whatever, but they were interviewed or a candidate. So just because you didn't see him as a name, that doesn't mean anything, really. It really means nothing in terms of how he's respected within, the coaching community or whatever. But
I just wanted a perfect example of that is Nash's or his name would have never came up if Knowles would have taken the job. We would have never heard about it.
Absolutely.
Like you and I, like I think it was Friday I told you that name and another, I believe. And it was like Friday or whatever. So and I'd heard this, and that's why I called you and said, hey, let's start doing some research on this guy, because, he could be a candidate if Knowles doesn't work out. And but nobody would have known that name had Knowles taken the job, is my point. So because it was nowhere to be found. It was nowhere. And, I can't sometimes just say all the stuff that I hear for a lot of reasons. So we'll hear names that just never get out because for whatever reason, they just can't get out. And so we have to be careful about what we're saying and doing and those types of things too. So with Ash, though, I mean, when you look at his situation, there's one thing, the only thing that concerns me about this, Jamie, is when he was in Rutgers, right? When let go, there was a lot of things said about how he was running the program, his arrogance, he was very hard on the players. He was very verbally abusive, supposedly. This is the kind of stuff we hear. And like, it's kind of like when Charlie Weiss left or Brian Kelly leaves, then all the dirt comes out. You know what I mean? And that dirt's going to be said everywhere. You know what I mean? It's going to be said whether, anybody leaves the program, you're going to hear dirt. So I don't think that you can look at the situation and say, well, there's, this is, he was doing a terrible job or whatever the case may be. And, he was screaming at people and punching people or anything like that. But, it does come out and you hear this stuff. And when you look at what Marcus Freeman has built, the culture around there, that's the only thing that concerns me about it is if he's a tough guy coach, which Urban Meyer very much is, which a lot of his coaches very much were. That was kind of browbeat into him. That's how we're going to coach things. That's why it didn't work down in Jacksonville. You just can't come in and just do that in today's game. Has this guy learned this? Is this going to be a problem? That's really my only concern about this. When I think of him as a defensive coordinator, I think there's been so much good said about him that I'm not concerned about this. This would be my only real concern about this. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think it's a good point to bring up. And the one thing that I think is really important to know, and I always look at it because relationships and knowing someone and trusting someone, and that's obviously how Marcus Freeman has worked in terms of who he's hired. He hires guys that he trusts, that he knows, right? So it matters if someone he trusts vouches for that person, right? And and I'm sure he's got all kind of Ohio State feedback on Ash, but I think the biggest thing, Joe Rudolph was on the same staff as him in Wisconsin from 2010 to 2012. This guy, you're around for 3 years. He was Ash was the defensive coordinator. Obviously, Rudolph was on the offensive side of the ball, but you're around that guy for 3 years. Whether or not they're friends, I don't know. I have no idea, right? But I can tell you one thing. If he thought he was a piece of crap, like not a good guy, Rudolph would say it. He would say, this isn't a guy you want to be around. This isn't a guy that is good for the culture. Because, I mean, obviously
that
Rudolph
stuff
understands
is said.
it.
No,
and that is said.
Absolutely said. Oh,
absolutely.
Totally, yeah.
So I think, and that is the kind of thing would be a disqualifying thing for him. So that matters a lot that Rudolph has worked with him and been around him.
Bilma, however you pronounce his name, took him from Wisconsin to Arkansas. I mean,
yes,
you don't take a guy unless you really think he's a good coach.
Yes,
you don't leave a situation, and that's where you drop off your dead weight is when you take the new coaching position. So we'll see.
I just want to bring up a couple things though, because I see this one. Sorry, Scott L. Okay, I think you should get rid of Scott L. Greg, because this guy's now saying that Joe Rudolph isn't a good offensive line coach. I think he is just trolling here. But just for the people who think that this wasn't, he did a bad job here, just whatever, right? I mean, I go back and I look at it and I'm like, well, I'm going to look at all this stuff too. And there's obviously people that I know who cover Texas very
yes,
they are in it with Texas like we are with Notre Dame, people that I respect. So, and I've talked to some of them a little bit about Ash, but I got to talk a little bit more to them about it. But if you look at kind of what happened, and I'm just going to put some numbers up there. So he was the DC at Wisconsin in 2011 and 2012. The defense is 27th and 16th at DF plus, which is, combined FBI and SC plus. So obviously some pretty good defenses. Went to Arkansas and then got hired by Urban, like you said, in 2014. They won the national championship. So they jumped from 41st in DF plus in 2013 to 15th. The year they won the national championship. They were second in 2015. That was obviously the team that played Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl. It was a pretty darn good defense. Obviously, they were loaded with talent, but they were the second best defense in college football that year. It's pretty good. Here's just some other kind of improvements. So pass defense, SP plus pass defense 2013, went to 8th and 4th in the 2 years under Ash. SP plus run defense, 58th and 13th. 42nd, then 17th. Clearly things didn't go well from Rutgers. Goes to, works with Tom Herman, who had worked with him at Ohio State, right? He was the OC there during that national championship run. He was an analyst for a year, and then he got in Herman's last year, he was the DC. To say oh man, he did a terrible job. First of all, Todd Orlando, who I almost forgot existed, did a terrible job there. They were 98th in yards per play in 2019. So under Ash, they improved to 27th. That's a pretty big improvement. Also have to remember too, you can look at, say, hey, they gave up 28 points per game. Look at the games that they played in the Big 12 that year. Everything is like a shootout. That's the first of all, that's a style of ball that they're playing there. You're not playing to, it's not the same as it is. It was a different type of thing. It was a different kind of game and all the things that you're dealing with. And it's just a totally different, there's context to that. Second of all, if look at how the players who played for him talked about him in there, and I read a bunch of stuff from Joseph Osai, Caden Stearns, guys who were drafted, talked about him glowingly and like what he did to help them get better and all that. And I know this from all the guys that cover Texas. That team was not very good in terms of like talent wise at the end of the Herman era of where they were kind of set up, right? It was not like specifically on defense. I think if you remember, Texas took Ovie Oghoufo, who was a third team Viper at Notre Dame. He started at Texas when they brought him in as a transfer. Like that's where things were at the beginning of like the Sark era. They did not have a ton of talent there. They did not have, it would have been interesting to see like where the defense was if he would have got to coach throughout these years, because all these guys like, the Alfred Collins, the Vernon Brodens, Ueyama, all those guys on the D line who end up becoming studs. Those guys were like freshmen, sophomores, like brand new guys who were not good, at that time, who grew into great players later on. And they became like a much deeper, the roster completely changed. And also he was a new defensive coordinator, 2020, the pandemic. They didn't even have spring ball. They didn't have spring ball. They didn't have whatever. So I don't think anyone should judge anything, even though the defense did get way better under him. You can't judge like, hey, this is what he is based on the one Texas season when everybody kind of knows that was not a normal season and whatever. And you can say, hey, why hasn't he been a defensive coordinator since then? Fair questions. And those are questions, obviously, Marcus Freeman would ask, but you could have said the same thing about Al Golden. And why wasn't he this? And
yeah,
it ended up being probably the best hire that Marcus Freeman made. So I don't know if he will be the guy or if he will be the right guy or whatnot. Who knows? Because Mike, you and I have been around enough where they hire someone who looks like a home run and it ends up terrible. They hire someone who we think we're like, I don't know about this, who ends up being great. It can change, right? We don't know until they actually get on campus, start working with the players, right? So whatever decision is made, if he's the guy, I'll wait till I see the product on the field. But
you got to remember,
it should be good. It should be good. The defense, if the defense isn't good next year, then yes, it is on the DC because they have good enough players to have a great defense next year.
Well, Al Golden didn't set the world on fire at Notre Dame in his first year either. It was better. It was better, but it was not, like what we saw the next 2 years. That's for sure. And it just takes time to adjust to things and get some stuff together. But whoever's going to have this defense is going to have a lot of really quality players. And so I think we'll be all right there. For me, I do think I just hope that they're able to keep Mike Mickens. I think that is really, really important. I hope Mike Mickens is cool with this. I hope they can coexist and that it works out, because I think Mike Mickens is a really talented coach. And I really hope that he's able to stick around here for a while and we'll see. But, I don't blame Marcus Freeman. People are like, well, why don't you go straight to Mike Mickens? If you do, like, if you cover the team as well as you and I cover the team, we know what they have here in the next couple of years, right? They have a chance to win the national championship in the next couple of years if they do things right, right? And a big part of that is going to be, do we hire the right defensive coordinator? So there are times where you take chances, and then there are times to do the smart thing. And I think that Mike, when you look at Marcus Freeman, he realizes that your window as a head coach and as a new coach isn't very long. And you have to make steady progress as a coach to be able to continue to sell your vision of the program. And so if Notre Dame were to take a guy that's learning on the job, Jamie, and then fall back to 9-4 this year coming up, people would be like, well, is Marcus Freeman really that great of a coach? when really all he did was maybe hire the wrong guy at defensive coordinator. Still same coach, just maybe hired the wrong guy at defensive coordinator. So at the end of the day, I think when you look at the situation, you have to say to yourself, if you're Marcus Freeman, you know that you have an opportunity here, that if you just hire the right guy, the guy that is competent, and you know how much this offense should improve, that you'll be in a great situation. What you don't want to do is do what they did, hiring Gerard Parker, who, good guy, worked hard, but clearly was just not the right guy. And how much does that set you back? How much does that set you back in respect amongst people that you're trying to say, look, we're turning this around? And then, your guy's gone after 1 year. So at the end of the day, I got to believe Marcus Freeman understands this. He's got some good quality coaches around him that he's talked to about these things. And so I think it's going to be fine. I just really hope that Mike Mickens is part of it, at least for 1 more year. I think it's important for Notre Dame to have that kind of continuity. And if he could stick around for 1 more year, that would certainly help. Greg, you want to add something?
How would you evaluate the hire if Mike Mickens were to leave?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say, just like it's hard to say for anything. I think it would be certainly less for me because, I think that Mickens is a really good coach, and we don't know what Ash can do. But is it a bigger risk to hire Mike Mickens as your defensive coordinator, or is it a bigger risk to hire Chris Ash, who has done this before? That's what we don't know. But I would say experience, people talk about experience, is very, very important. And I think it's important in the right situation. It's kind of like hiring Marcus Freeman made sense if you get 2 veteran coaches to coach with you, good offensive coordinator, good defensive coordinator, somebody's been around. That makes a lot of sense. Do you hire Marcus Freeman as a head coach with 2 brand new coordinators? No, you don't do that. And you have to kind of mitigate what is the biggest risk here, and can we overcome that risk? And as a head coach, you have to look at it. And then the other thing too, of course, there's the friendship thing. I mean, that's what comes into it as well. I mean, nobody wants to fire their best friend, that's just part of it. And people can say, well, they understand that it's coaching and that, you'll get over it, that type of thing. People don't get over that very easily.
No,
it just
don't.
doesn't happen. People act like, oh yeah, well, they'll get over it. No, they don't. They may work for the guy again, but they remember. They definitely remember. I can think of a couple of examples right now of exactly that situation. So I'm concerned if they lose Mickens. I don't think it's the end of the world, but I am concerned. If he does come, I'm not sure you'd do better than this. I don't know who else is out there that you could hire that would be a better hire than this. I'm sure you could try and take some guys, but really, who's the best defensive coordinators out there? Who's really shown that? I just really haven't seen a lot of great. There wasn't a lot of great defense this year. There wasn't a lot of great offense either. I just don't see anybody that I sit there and say that guy is definitely the guy we should take. And I don't know what the answers are there. Go ahead, Chris or Jamie.
Well, I think it is one of those things where it will be looked at if Mickens, if you hire Chris Ash and part of that is Mike Mickens leaving, or you hire anyone and part of it is Mike Mickens leaving, people will be upset because obviously, although I always just find it hilarious how literally 2 years ago, people were like, Mike Mickens sucks. He's whatever. Mm-hmm. And then now it's like, man, this guy's the most valuable guy on staff. We can't lose him. He's got to stay. But it'll be about like anything. It'll be about who they get to replace him. Because you can't get another really good corner coach. And I'm sure they will hire someone really good, but it's just like, well, that person has to do the same or better job as Mickens, and that's what it's about. I think the only
it's like Chris Sabo here, he's talking about Tyler Santucci at Georgia Tech. What has that guy ever done? He worked under Elko, and
That was Mike.
really did he really
Yeah.
call defense? I doubt it. I highly doubt it. So he's at Georgia Tech, and what has he done at Georgia Tech? They haven't had a good defense. They've been a little bit better, but they haven't. He doesn't have near the experience of what a Chris Ash has. Not even close.
No,
and
he
hasn't worked for a
doesn't.
major program either.
Yeah.
Hasn't worked for a major big time program. You know what I mean? So everybody's going to throw out names, and some may end up being great player or coaches down the road, and some don't. But I remember, gosh, I could bring up hundreds of guys that were, we have to hire this guy, and then was never heard of again. It just was never a hot name again because, some guys have a good season and then they're just nobody. And there's just countless guys you could bring up that were the hot candidate and then just nobody really ever heard of again. So, go ahead, Jamie.
I mean, I just think that whatever it takes, people are going to react a certain way, just like they reacted to Golden, right? People are going to react a certain way, no matter what happens, no matter how the staff is reconfigured and all that. But I know I'd see like a ton of names thrown out there that would be like, I'm like, what is based on what? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not saying like the people in the comments don't know ball or anything like that.
Saying Tom Zibikowski would be a better defensive coordinator.
Like,
I mean,
okay, like come on, just disqualify yourself right now. Like that, just you can't. People do this all the time, where they say like, "How about Tyler Stockton?" Because he coached at Notre Dame. The thing is that if you trust Marcus Freeman, which people should have some trust in him after what's happened, after he made that Golden hire, after they had the season, you should have at least some trust to at least give whatever decision he makes a chance to see what happens. You should at least trust that before saying like everything is garbage or whatever. But he's a pretty good defensive coordinator himself. Thinks he would know defense. Isn't going to hire somebody who is a failure or someone he thinks is going to fail at Notre Dame. So,
well, let's look at all the coaches he's hired that were awful, though. There hardly any. You know what I mean?
No. Yeah.
Who's he hired that's been a really bad hire?
I mean, you can say Chauncey Stuckey, and that was a Tommy Rees.
That was Tommy Rees. That was not.
That was the only one that you could say.
But like in fairness, though, like he was kind of talked into that, right? Like he was talked
totally
into that.
He didn't want to do it.
But like, he's Chris Ash is coming recommended too. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's not within the program, so it's different. It is not the same thing. But like Chris Ash is coming recommended from this. I mean, and frankly, so was Al Golden. Like Al Golden was a guy that Swarbrick said like I think he interviewed him in the 2009-2010 cycle, like during the whole Brian Kelly thing, and he was impressed with them, and that was kind of a callback for Swarbrick, right? So there is context to that too. Like I think he's like Marcus Freeman has done a good job with the hires, right? And look, Al Golden absolutely worked out. I mean, Al Golden was
the Stuckey thing, and I'm just laughing because
the Stuckey thing. But the point is, even the Stuckey thing, like how many hires
he did that to appease Tommy Rees. That's the only reason he was.
But even so, he has made how many hires is that? He's made a ton of hires, and it's like if you make 10 hires and one of them doesn't go well, like that is your hit rate is pretty good. So like
you're doing way better than every other head coach.
And the funny thing is like I'm defending this, and I'm probably of the three of us, I am probably the least fired up about the possibility of this. But like I do think we have to be fair about it, right? Like Marcus Freeman has to look when Mason left, the special teams coach, he was everyone was so excited about Brian Mason, and special teams is definitely going to get worse. And then he got Biaggi, who is different in the way that he coaches, but also like Notre Dame's fake punts were a major part of this season. They were a major part of last season. Like Marcus Freeman made a very good hire in Marty Biaggi. And by the way, there were a lot of people who weren't very fired up about Marty Biaggi either. You know, like, I don't know that we had a strong opinion because it's like, he's a special teams coach. Let's see how it goes. I know that there weren't a lot of people who were fired up about Marty Biaggi, right? I think my main point about bringing up the thing about if they lose Mickens, like, how do you feel about this, is because I don't need Marcus Freeman to hire Mike Mickens if he doesn't think he can do it, right? I don't need him to do that. That is one where it's like, if he doesn't go with Mickens, he just doesn't think he can do the job right now. And that is what it is. My thing is, like, Notre Dame, I don't think needs to be making a hire that if you lose Mickens, I don't like the hire, right? Like, I don't want that to be the situation. That's why I asked you the question. And that's why I want to get Jamie's thoughts on that too, because, you know, if it was Haynes from Indiana and Notre Dame loses Mike Mickens, it's like, hey, we know that guy can coach. If it was Rossi, who is at Michigan State, and Notre Dame loses Mike Mickens, we know that guy can coach. He's in coaching right now. Like, he's done a good job recently. We know what his track record is. We know what he can do. Same thing with Haynes at Indiana. Like, Chris Ash, there is an open question, right? And, you know, I take Jamie's point absolutely at Texas about COVID year, and he wasn't really around. 2020 was Mike Mickens' worst year as a Notre Dame cornerback coach who had just gotten there. That was the worst class he brought in, but by far. And there were reasons for that, and he has rebounded. The problem for Chris Ash, and the problem for us in evaluating that, is he never got the years in 22, in like 21, 22, 23 to actually see what he could do if he could build up the Texas defense. Like we got to see from Al Golden, who, you know, in 2022, I think they were 30th in F+, then they went to 7th. Then they went to 3rd. We never got to see Chris Ash.
But he was a linebacker coach. He was not the defensive coordinator at Cleveland of the Cincinnati.
No. In 22, 23, 24.
Well,
I'm
sure,
saying in 22,
it's the same thing as hiring Golden, is what I'm saying. It's the same thing because
to me it kind of isn't, because Al Golden was the defense or as a linebacker coach for a Super Bowl team. It's not like Chris Ash is coaching DBs for the Eagles. Like, if Chris Ash was the secondary coach for the Eagles, if Chris Ash was the secondary coach for the Eagles, no one's complaining about it.
Sorry to interrupt here, Greg, but I just want to bring out this too, because remember, BK hired Matt House, who was a successful defensive coordinator in Kentucky, was the linebackers coach for the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, generally people thought, hey, that's a pretty good hire. I mean, look what the Chiefs have done on defense. Look what he was at Kentucky before, left there. He was good. So that went as bad as any hire could go, right? Like, that was horrible.
Yeah. Like,
I mean, yeah.
Nothing.
No, hold on. Just let me finish my point. Okay. All I want to just say is that, of course, I mean, if it was just me and I'm just throwing it out there, I don't even know if you even talk to her or even consider. I mean, I would be like Jim Leonard. That's who I'd want. Because one, yes, he's there. That's a perfect example of what you were just saying, Greg. When he was at Wisconsin, first of all, it's Wisconsin. They weren't recruiting at the highest level.
Right.
They had top 5 defenses, developed dudes into NFL players over and over again. When he was there, 4 or 5 years there, they were like top 5 in DF plus while he was there. Like, that's incredible. And we saw how his defense worked. They were great. Went to, was kind of like, on the fringe. He was in and out, was a consultant with Illinois for a year. Denver Broncos, DB coach. Well, their defense was awesome this year. So it's like a lot of things there. I would think, man, that would be a home run hire. I would be pumped. I'm like, I want to watch Jim Leonard coach these players that Notre Dame has right now. I would be pumped for that. So from that kind of perspective, if you're looking at, or if Jim Knowles got hired, you're like, Jim Knowles is a heck of a coach. Look what he just did, whatever. Yes, you would absolutely want that kind of thing. I just think that people are so rushed to say, hey, because this guy, these are the circumstances, this guy isn't the guy, or whatever. It's like, well, I'm going to let it play out first before I say not. And then also, too, when I dig deeper into it, when everyone says this guy's trash, well, no, he's not actually trash. That's not the case. It's just so even, Chris Sable saying, well, he was a scout for the Jaguars and the Jaguars suck. It's like, well, he was a scout for 1 year and they haven't drafted. So it's like, you don't know. That does literally nothing. Also, there's good coaches on bad teams all the time, or good personnel people who work for bad teams all the time. You just don't know. So I think with anything, people are going to react a certain way because Notre Dame just got to the thing. They're like, well, now Notre Dame should spend this. They should get this, whatever, right? Which, fair enough. I totally think that would be ideal thing. It's like the whole thing with like them hiring Marcus Freeman. He was the hot name. He was this young up-and-coming coach who coached a great defense. And I mean, obviously that ended up being a great hire and turned into a really good head coach. But if you look at where all these things are, it's like it doesn't – ultimately, it only matters that he gets it right. And if whether or not, coaches leave, they have to readjust things, whatever, that's all that matters. Because
nobody's going to know that until we coach.
Exactly. No one's going to know it. Yeah.
Nobody's going to know.
No one's going to know.
Nobody's going to speculate, and nobody's going to have a clue whether this is going to be a good hire or not. The interesting thing is you bring up Leonard, and there's no question he would be somebody you would consider. I think it's interesting that he goes back and he says, I'm sticking with the Broncos.
I don't know if you saw that, Jamie. He's re-upping with Denver.
So I did see that, but I figured.
Let me say
because he wasn't, mentioned.
I mean, I can't imagine if Marcus Freeman really wanted him that he would stick with Denver. I just, you know what I mean? I don't know why you would. You could be a defensive coordinator in college football again at a great situation. It just doesn't make
a ton of money. Yeah,
totally. Yes, way more than you get paid in Denver. Denver's probably a little bit nicer place than South Bend.
That's true.
Depending on where you're at, but it's also way more expensive. Yeah. I know that way more expensive. So I think people need to look at it that way. I'm sure Leonard would have been interested. And, we know we have the Rudolph connection there as well. He knows a lot about Wisconsin and Leonard's time there, I'm sure. I don't know what the answer is. I know no matter what the decision will be, people are going to complain about it, regardless of what it is. Whether Mickens stays, Mickens goes, it's Ash, somebody else. Somebody's going to complain about it.
Yeah.
The other thing I know is none of it matters. None of it matters. We don't know. Nobody knows. Marcus Freeman doesn't know if it's going to be a success. Nobody does. Until you actually show up and coach, you don't really know. And you just got to do the best job you can in evaluating and hoping you hire the right people. I'll say this. I think people that are successful people, they know how to hire the right people. The successful people know who is going to do a good job in their organization. They've proven it over and over and over again. And I think Marcus Freeman's done a good job of that so far in his hiring. But when you look at, the reason Nick Saban was a dynamo for all these years was he did a great job, and he had to do this over and over and over and over and over of hiring guys and plugging them in and making it work somehow. And great coaches and great leaders and great, I guess, owners and those people who make those decisions, they're successful because they can recognize talent and they know what's going to work. So we just have to hope that that's the situation. Last topic I want to get to, and a lot of people have asked about this, is the money situation and blah, blah, blah. And why didn't Notre Dame spend more in the portal and this and that? And here's the thing that I don't think a lot of people consider. And we know this because we hear stuff back channels. It costs a lot for Notre Dame just to keep the guys that they had. And I don't think that people realize how much a lot of Notre Dame's players have been approached by other teams to get them to leave. The fact that they've been able to keep all or most of these guys is remarkable, really. There is a lot of teams that have been after Notre Dame's players. And there were times where we were like, boy, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if they're going to be able to keep all these guys. And I would rather ride with the guys are going to be good players versus going out and spending money in the portal on people you don't know are going to fit in your culture and do the right things. And so people have been asking, well, what about this? And should we be spending more on this and this and this? First of all, I didn't see many names in the portal that I was overly interested in. I think that people think that it's this gold mine of talent that all these people are going to get. Now, could you get a Jeremiah Smith and pay $4.5 million for him? Yeah, I suppose, but is that worth it? I mean, I don't know. Is it worth $4.5 million to get a Jeremiah Smith? I don't know. What does that do to your program, right? If you're going to go out and you pay Jeremiah Smith $4.5 million, and the next closest guy is making $1 million, what does that do to your program? Is that can you operate like that moving forward for that long of period of time? So I think that's the question I think people have to also consider as well. But again, I don't think people understand how much teams were after Notre Dame's players and how much Notre Dame had to put into making sure they keep the guys that we know are good and proven players. Thoughts here, Yama?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like, they were throwing money at guys. And I think that really, if you think about when we're talking about all these things about we're excited about the offense for next year and all these guys coming back, well, imagine if those guys left. And the guys that left were all guys that was like, it's uncertain what their role was going to be. And
yes,
definitely they would go somewhere else and start.
Yeah.
And be guaranteed to start.
Well, and Coogan and Rocco's, that's their only chance. They have to go where they can start.
Pendleton,
I don't think either one wanted to leave. They just had to. They didn't have any other choice because, are you going to beat out Jugasaw? Are you going to beat out Knapp if they move him to guard? I don't think so. I don't think either of those guys can.
Probably not, right?
No.
And that's the thing. And like, what are you going to wait around just in case one of these guys gets hurt again? No, like, they're going to try. Obviously, you're going to try to keep playing ball as long as you can. Make the league. You want to just, keep doing that. So I think that's, retaining talent is more important than even adding. They've already did a pretty good job, I think, at the portal of like addressing needs and all that. But like, when I'm looking at a lot of like, if I just go into like 24/7's like top 20 guys in the portal, I got to tell you, like, there's a bunch of these guys that basically had bad years last year. Like, maybe they were really great before, but they had bad years last year, or they were injured, or something like. And it's not to say that some of these guys, like, hey, maybe like where Louisville got Ja'Cory Brooks, and Ja'Cory Brooks was good as a sophomore, and then he didn't really do much, and then he had a shoulder thing, and then hey, he was great, became a number one receiver for them. Guy's probably going to play in the league, get drafted, all that. Hey, that's great. But most of the guys, like Zachariah Branch, is the 6th rated guy by 24/7 and thing.
I wouldn't even want him on my team.
He might be great, but like,
you got to take his brother.
A non-factor for them this year.
Totally.
He was a non-factor. And there's no one who watched any kind of film who would tell you, I'm taking Zachariah Branch over Mekhi Lemon, who was, obviously very similar players. They came in the same recruiting class. So it's one of these things where I don't think you're seeing more teams spend to keep and retain players. So less of these guys are going in, maybe at places like SC where they, it's obviously very transactional, and they're people are kind of reading the writing on the wall of what's going on, that they lost some guys there, but there isn't too many places like that, that things have to be bad for people to kind of bounce, because or else that's not going to happen. So I think the fact that Notre Dame, when we're talking about I saw people like, is there something wrong with the culture? I mean, obviously not, because guys turn down more money to stay at Notre Dame.
You know who it is out there stirring it again. And, that's just what it is. That's what he does. And look, I've seen he said that there's problems at the offensive line. Look, anybody who loses their starting job, they're not going to be happy. So Rocco and Coogan aren't going to be happy. Why would they be happy? I mean, why would they be happy? Why would Sam Pendleton be happy? All right. So yeah, I'm sure that there's some people who are not happy in the offensive line room. Well, they used to start and now they don't. And I don't, if you look at the decisions, I don't think any of those were bad decisions. I don't think that the guys that ended up playing in front of them were necessarily better. I don't think Coogan was better than Ashton Craig, although I do think he had his leadership. He did a pretty good job. I don't think Rocco was better than anybody that played, previous. I don't think that was the case. And so I understand people are going to be upset. That makes sense. When you started and now all of a sudden you're not, then all of a sudden you're like, this sucks. I'm not happy about this. So look, I mean, I think a lot of people can say a lot of things all they want, but when you take an offensive line that had 6 total starts, you had to play 9 different guys, right? 10 different guys throughout the year. And the guys that started the season only had 6 starts total, and you go play for a national championship. I'm sorry, you did a good job. No matter how you want to spin it or what kind of inside BS you want to try and put out there, you did a good job. I'm sorry, you just did a great job. I don't think any other coach could have done a better job. I really don't. I mean, I really don't. How could you have that much inexperience and then you got a quarterback who really isn't a great passer, hasn't learned the system, a bunch of wide receivers who are just not guys that are going to be NFL players, the vast majority of them, and then you go play for a national championship? I'm sorry. That he did a hell of a job. It just is what it is. And I don't know. Sometimes the National Enquirer is interesting to read, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it just, but that doesn't mean it's true. Let's just put it that way. So, all right. Anything you guys want to add before we close down the show?
Yeah, I think if Jeremiah Smith can be had for $4.5 million, you mess around and find out what that'll do to your culture. Get him in your program. That's
you would do that. You would do that.
Yeah, yes, I would do that. Yes, I would.
Do you think Jeremiah? I would. Let me ask you this: do you think Jeremiah Smith would come to Notre Dame?
No, I don't.
No,
I think we could give Jeremiah Smith $5.5 million and he wouldn't come to Notre Dame.
I'm just saying, really if he called Notre Dame and said, "Hey, I want 4.5,"
you know why Jeremiah Smith isn't going to come to Notre Dame?
Why?
Because Jeremiah Smith would have to go to class, and he's not. They don't do school. They don't do school at Ohio State. Yeah, they don't do school. Jeremiah Smith ain't ever coming to here, and neither is Carnell Tate. Neither is a lot of these guys. They don't want to go to school. And if I'm Jeremiah Smith, I don't really blame him, to be honest with you. I mean, he's pretty much set for the rest of his life as is now, so if he's smart. So, don't let that school get in the way, I guess. So, all right, guys, that's going to be it. Once again, I wanted to say thanks for everybody for watching. If you listen, you can go to YouTube, check us out. Make sure you subscribe. Search for Irish Sports Daily. The other thing if I could ask, and we'd greatly appreciate it, if you like the show, you like the YouTube stuff, if you could please just share it with other Irish sports or, Notre Dame fans, anybody you can think of, share it on your social media, share it everywhere. And it would greatly help us improve and grow our channel. So please, if you would, share the content that we have on YouTube. It'll absolutely help us, and so we'd greatly appreciate that. And that's going to be it. Thanks everybody for listening to the show. We will talk to you next week on Power Hour, and hopefully we'll be talking about a lot of fun stuff. I know we'll be hitting some recruiting, and then maybe there'll be some hires by then, and we'll go from there. We didn't even get a chance to talk about the Chad Bowden loss. We didn't even get to talk about that, so we'll have to hit that up next week as well. And certainly that's going to be something to consider as well. All right. That's going to be it. Thanks for watching and listening. We'll talk to you next week.